Shalom, everyone. Shalom, Jerry. Shalom, Baruch. Nice to see you. Miriam is not with us tonight. She has the flu. So I spoke to her before and said a little prayer for her so that she'll be feeling better really quickly. So now tonight we're beginning the third book of the Torah. For those watching, for those who are new, the Torah are the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, which in Hebrew is Vayikra, which means and he called. God is calling to Moses, to us. And then we'll have Numbers, and the last one is Deuteronomy. Now, somebody asked me this week, which is the best version of the Bible? And to tell you the truth, other than Hebrew, there is no good version in English or in any other language, mainly because Hebrew cannot be translated into any other language. It's a very special language. It's got several layers of interpretation by the rabbis. It's a language of pictures. Even the words of the Hebrew itself were hieroglyphics. It's filled with idiomatic expressions. It's like one picture paints 1,000 words. So to try to translate the Hebrew into a language that has no concept of some of the Hebraic expressions, some of the ideas, like for instance, the idea of Mashiach, anointing. There were no other cultures that anointed their priests the way we did in the temple. It's an idiomatic expression is one, for example, if you're an actor like Jerry, you're a Shakespearean actor, and you're going on stage and I say to you, break a leg. Now, if you're a Spanish person and you hear me saying break a leg, you'd think I was crazy. Why am I wishing you should break a leg? No, it's an expression that we understand that means good luck, have a good performance. Well, it's the same in Hebrew. There's many things that cannot be interpreted. So when I'm looking for the right, how to translate something, I'll go to at least 4 or 5 versions, and I'll look up the Hebrew. I'll look up an interlinear. I'll look and see what our sages have said about it. So there's many, but basically, for us to understand the Bible, the best way is to read it the way we're going to be reading it tonight, to really go through it verse by verse, but step back, understand that it was spoken for a people at a specific time in history, a specific people whom God had chosen, who had been slaves, not rabbis, not priests. I mean, as far as in Catholicism go, not PhDs, simple, ordinary people, all the way from the lowest slaves to the princes of Egypt, and also the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude who left with us. So you have a people who are one nation under God, both Israelites and the Ger, those who've come with us. And here they are at the base of Mount Sinai, listening to God's voice, receiving his 10 commandments, the only thing written in stone by the finger of God. And that is our constitution. That is the basis. Everything that we're going to read now are applications of those 10 and what they mean in our lives. Vayikra took place in a period of 1 month, as we'll see, because it says it was the first day of the 2nd month of the 2nd year. This is when we're reaching in Vayikra. So let's begin. We're going to, if you want to follow along, those of you at home, if you want to follow along and read while we're reading this particular version, we're going to be reading from Leviticus 1, the first verse, to Leviticus 5:26. That's Vayikra 1:1 to 5:26. All right, I'm going to share the screen and we're going to begin reading it. Now, Jerry, I don't know, you said, would you like to read, would you like to begin reading a bit?
Yeah, I'll read about 10, 10, 10.
Okay.
Move it over to the left. Move
Okay.
English over to the left. Okay. Hold
All
that
right.
position.
Okay, Brian. Okay, let me make it a little bit bigger. If I can zoom here. Let me try this one. Okay. Go ahead, Jerry. Is that
Lord,
okay?
Vayikra, and the Lord called unto Moses and spoke unto him out of the tent of meeting, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When any man of you bringeth an offering unto the Lord, he shall bring your offering of the cattle, even of the herd or of the flock.
Okay, I want you to stop here just for one moment because I want you to notice something here. Let me go back here. When any man brings an offering, Mikem Adam brings an offering, Yakriv, Korban. The Korban is an offering. And the root of this word in Hebrew is kerev. And kerev means to draw near, to approach. It has the understanding that when you're going to bring an offering from your flock, from the cattle, from the herd, from the flock, it's in order for you to be able to draw close to God. Okay, that's very important, that word kerev, korban.
If his offering be a burnt offering of the herd, he shall offer it a male without blemish. He shall bring it to the door of the tent of meeting, that he may be accepted before the Lord.
Okay, this burnt offering, hold on, Jer. This burnt offering is called olah. There are 5 different types of offerings that we're going to be reading about in the book of Vayikra. The burnt offering, the olah, the animal was completely burnt. Completely, it was gone. It wasn't brought as food. And it says here that it was to be brought before the Ochel Moed, the tent of meeting, so that the person bringing it may be accepted before the Lord. And we're going to see that idea embellished as we continue. Okay, go ahead.
And he shall lay his hand upon the head of the burnt offering, and it shall be accepted for him to make atonement for him.
Okay, hold on. Let's look at that. I want you to picture this. Imagine that you have a flock of animals, a flock of sheep. Most people who had flocks, this was their livelihood. They sold them, they used them as food, and he lay his hand upon the head. When you took one of your animals and you put your hand on the head of that animal and you gave it up as a burnt offering so that it would be accepted to make, now the word atonement in Hebrew is lekaper. Kaper is a covering. You know, you're wearing a kippah, Jerry. Brian is wearing a kippah. It's a covering for his head. It shows that God is going to take this special offering from this man who's bringing it because he knows he's done something that he needs forgiveness for. And he's taking the very best of his flock. And it's going to be difficult for him because imagine putting his hand, he's going to touch the hand of this innocent creature who is living, knowing that it's going to be killed and offered so that God could cover his sin. That is a very difficult concept for us to understand. Okay, you can continue here.
And he shall kill the bullock before the Lord, And Aaron's sons, the priests, shall present the blood and dash the blood round about against the altar that is at the door of the tent of meeting. And he shall flay the burnt offering and cut it into its pieces. And the sons of Aaron, the priests, shall put fire upon the altar and lay wood in order upon the fire. And Aaron's sons, the priests, shall lay the pieces and the head and the suet.
Suet is fat. Suet is the fat of the animal.
In order upon the wood that is on the fire, which is upon the altar. But its inwards and its legs shall he wash with water, and the priest shall make the whole smoke on the altar for a burnt offering, an offering made by fire of a sweet savor unto the Lord.
Now this word, this expression, reach nechoyach, is a sweet savor. Imagine what would make this offering, because God created everything. He created these animals. He created us. What would make this offering to God a sweet savor? It had nothing to do with the death of the animal. It had to do with the fact that we were coming to him to acknowledge what we had done wrong. And God would cover our sin. You know, right at the very beginning, when Adam and Eve, they were given one commandment, and the commandment was not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But Eve was tempted, and she had Adam and her disobey this one commandment. And what they did was they hid from God. They didn't acknowledge what they did. God asked them 3 times, Adam, where are you? And each time he said he was hiding, but never once did he say, we made a mistake. We shouldn't have done this. Would you please forgive us? Here, God is giving us a way of approaching him. But we don't have a temple today. We don't have a tent of meeting, a mishkan. How do we do this today? How do we approach God today? Because there isn't one of us who doesn't do something wrong. We may do something wrong each and every day of our lives, or we may have done something horrible in the past. And what are we going to do today so that we can make it right with God? What do you think about that, Jer?
Well, I think prayer does a little bit of that.
Yes, definitely. When we present ourselves as an offering to God, that doesn't mean we kill ourselves. He knows our intentions. He knows our hearts, and he wants us to present ourselves in a way that we will be forgiven, in a way that that it's a sweet savor for him as well. Okay, you can continue.
And if his offering be of the flock, whether of the sheep or of the goats, for a burnt offering, he shall offer it a male without blemish. And he shall kill it on the side of the altar northward before the Lord. And Aaron's sons, the priests, shall dash its blood against the altar round about. And he shall cut it into pieces, and the priest shall lay them with its head and its sweat in order of the wood that is on the fire, which is upon the altar. You continue, Peggy?
But the inwards and the legs he shall wash with fire, and the Kohen shall offer the entire animal and make it smoke upon the altar. It's a burnt offering made by fire of a sweet savor to the Lord. Now, the reason for these sacrifices, these offerings, remember they had just left Egypt. They had seen other kinds of offerings. They had seen offerings in the temples to the gods. And they didn't take our people. God didn't say not to do that. But what he was instituting here was a slow weaning process away from the gods of the Egyptians to focus them on him. It was going to be a small process. We wouldn't need to do this forever. It was only going to be for a time. And it would be a sweet savor to the Lord because we were taking the best of what we had and bringing it to him. And if his offerings to the Lord were offering a fowl, he would bring his offering of turtle doves or young pigeons. Imagine these turtle doves were an instrument of peace. The dove is and it says, the priest shall pinch off its head. I mean, I can't even imagine what the Kohanim would have to go through and how difficult a job it was for him. And make it smoke on the altar. And the blood would be drained out on the side of the altar, and he would take away its crop and the feathers and cast it next to the altar on the east side in the place of the ashes. God was very specific about how things would be done. And it was always going to be in a specific order, in exactly the way that he was going to show the Kohanim. And it would be very different than what the priests in the temple of the gods of Egypt were going to do. And he will cut it, he will rend it by the wings, but not divide it in two asunder. And the Kohen will make it smoke upon the altar and upon the wood that's upon the fire. It's a burnt offering made by fire. Again, a sweet savor to the Lord. He wants us to bring it with all our hearts, and he would accept this sweet smell. Not that the animals smelled good, but the idea was the intention of our hearts. Now, this is very important, this next one. We're going to Leviticus, the 2nd chapter now, verse 1. When anyone brings a meal offering or a grain offering to the Lord, it shall be a fine flour. He's going to pour oil on it and frankincense on it. And he'll bring it to Aaron's sons, the Kohanim. And they shall take it, a handful of the fine flour and the oil and the frankincense, and the Kohen shall make a memorial, the smoke upon the altar, an offering made by fire, a sweet savor to the Lord. But what's left of the meal offering shall be Aaron's and his sons. It is a thing most holy of the offering of the Lord made by fire. So what they were going to do is they were going to take this fine flour and they were going to knead it and mix it with oil and frankincense, and they were going to be able to eat it. It was also an offering that would cover the sins of the 4 of the 5 different types of offerings, which we will see throughout the book of Leviticus. Now, there's one thing that pagans do is it's almost like they worship the blood. I have seen a ceremony called Santeria, which is a pagan priest will put himself under the bull that's being killed, and the blood will run all the way down him, almost in a trance with this blood. And that's God wants us to take away from that. And here he's saying it doesn't need to be a blood offering. One of the tenets of Christianity is that God needed a blood offering for sin to be forgiven. And here the Torah shows us that the offering could also be of fine flour. And when you bring a meal offering baked in the oven, it shall be unleavened cakes. That was not to be leavened, because in the sacrifices of leaven of the pagans were done with leaven, and they would never do it with salt. That's why a little later we're going to see that we were to do it with salt. So they bring a meal offering, a grain offering of wheat, of flour, of different kinds of grains, unleavened cakes. And the idea of leaven, just like we're coming up to Pesach very soon, the idea of leaven has to do with pride. You know, when something's puffed up, God does not want us puffed up. That's what this picture is. We are to come to him with a humble heart, bring our offerings in humility because we know we've done something wrong. And it's to mix the fine flour with oil or unleavened wafers. For us, it's matzah here, matzot. It's not wafer, it's matzot, which is why we eat matzot on Pesach. We see that they're preparing it because, again, we're beginning now the month of Nisan. And here they're in the month of Nisan that this is going to be taking place. And if your offering is a meal offering baked on a griddle, it shall be of fine flour, again unleavened, mixed with oil. Break it into pieces, pour oil on it. It's a meal offering. And usually the oil was pure olive oil. And if your offering is a meal offering of the stewing pan, it shall be made of fine flour with oil. You shall bring the meal offering to the Lord, and shall be presented to the Kohen, and they bring it to the altar. The Kohen shall take it as a memorial, make it smoke upon the altar. It's an offering made by fire, again, a sweet savor, because we're bringing it from the depths of our heart. Whatever's left of the meal shall be Aaron's and his sons. It's a thing most holy, made by fire. No meal offering you shall bring to the Lord shall be made with leaven. And it's the same thing. You shall make no leaven nor any honey smoke as an offering made by fire, because that was a pagan ritual. They would take the offering. It was they would take the their offerings would be made with leaven, and then they would pour honey over it. And God was saying, not for us. We are going to be different. I am setting you apart. And it says this would be smoke as an offering made by fire to the Lord, as an offering of first fruits. This idea of first fruits is so important. And this, just the way the covering brought us back to Adam and Eve, this first fruits bring us back to Cain and Abel. Both of them brought offerings to God. Abel was a shepherd, so he brought an animal, which was the best of his flock. Cain, it says, was a farmer, and he brought an offering of vegetation. It didn't say the first fruits. It says he brought an offering. So his heart was not to give the best. His heart was to bring whatever. He kept the best for himself, whereas Abel brought the first fruits. Abel's offering was accepted, not because it was a blood sacrifice, but because it was the best. When you go to someone's home and you bring them a gift because you're invited, let's say for Shabbat dinner, bring something that is the best offering. When we go and we would meet in the synagogue, we would bring the best of our foods to share with others. But they shall not come up for a sweet savor on the altar. Every meal offering of yours you shall season with salt, because the pagans would not. They rejected the salt. Neither shall you suffer the salt of the covenant of the Lord to be lacking for any meal offering. In other words, they should put salt in everything. And I'm so glad, because I love salt. With all your offerings, you shall offer salt. Salt was a preservative. It was a way of receiving salary. The word was melach. Here we see in the Hebrew, melach. And it's also the sign of the Shabbat, where we were not to melachto. No work would be done on that day. If you bring a meal offering of first fruits, again, You shall bring it, the meal offering of first fruits of corn in the ear parched with fire, even buckwheat of the fresh ear, pour oil on it, lay frankincense. It's a meal offering. And this would be a memorial. The groats or the various types of grains, the oil with all the frankincense, it's an offering made by fire to the Lord. Chapter 3. If the offering, let me know if you want to read again, Jerry.
Yeah, I'll read 7 verses. 7.
Okay, good.
And his offering be a sacrifice of peace offering. If he offer of the herd, whether male or female, he shall offer it without blemish before the Lord. And he shall lay his hand upon the head of his offering and kill it at the door of the tent of meeting. And Aaron's sons, the priests, shall dash the blood against the altar round about.
You see that when they would bring the offerings, it had to be without blemish. In other words, they had to really examine these animals and make sure that there was no cuts, or it had to be young. It was an offering to God. One of the problems that Yeshua ran into later when the temple was there in Israel is that the Kohanim, the temple had become corrupt, and the Kohanim were selling animals that were less than these. They were not the best. They were charging a lot of money, and he knocked over the tables of the money changers, and he was upset with them because they were selling animals that were far from what God wanted us to do.
And he shall present of the sacrifice of peace offering, an offering made by fire unto the Lord, the fat that covered the inwards, and all the fat that is upon the inwards, and the 2 kidneys, and the fat that is on them, which is by the loins, and the lobe above the liver, which he shall take away hard by the kidneys. And Aaron's sons shall make it smoke on the altar upon the burnt offering, which is upon the wood that is on the fire. It is an offering made by fire of a sweet savor unto the Lord. And if his offering for a sacrifice of peace offerings unto the Lord be of the flock, male or female, he shall offer it without blemish.
This was one of the offerings, shalamim. We saw olah, and this one is shalamim. It's a peace offering.
If he bring a lamb for his offering, then shall he present it before the Lord. You're on.
And he shall lay his hand upon the head of his offering and kill it before the tent of meeting. And Aaron's son shall dash the blood thereof against the offering all around. He shall present the sacrifice of peace offerings by fire, the fat, the tail, the rump bone, the fat that covers the inwards, the kidneys, the fat on the loins, the lobe of the livers, the kidneys. The Kohen shall make it smoke upon the altar. It is the food of the offering made by fire. His offering could also be a goat. It wasn't only a lamb. How often we hear Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. But here, it's a goat. We never hear that. You see, you can't make up a theology if it's not the same as what it says in the Torah. The Torah is our foundation. Anything read later has to stand up in light of Torah. He shall lay his hand upon the head of it, kill it before the tent of meeting, and the sons of Aaron shall dash the blood around the altar. He shall present the offering, the fat that covers the inwards, the kidneys, the fat on the loins, the lobe of the liver, again, and this shall be a perpetual statute. Now, the statute here is called a chukat. We don't, a chukah, there's 3 different types of commandments. The first 3 are the mitzvot, the mitzvah, the first 3 commandments, our relationship with God. The middle 2 are the Shabbat and the honor your parents, those are called chukim. A chukah, or a hukat here, olam, is a perpetual statute, is a statute that doesn't have a logical explanation. We do it because God tells us to do it. And in this case, perpetual would be as long as there would be a temple or a mishkan. After that, it won't be needed anymore. God would show us a new way. And the last ones were the mishpatim, would be the last 5 of the 10 commandments, which are how to treat our neighbors. It would be a perpetual chukah throughout our generations, in all our dwellings, that you shall eat neither fat nor blood. We don't know why, but God says don't eat fat, don't eat blood. The blood, I understand, and it's very serious for us as Jewish people that we would never eat blood. As a matter of fact, my great-grandparents came to this country from Ukraine in 1906, and they were forced to leave because of the pogroms, the murder of Jews in the Soviet Union. Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union at that time, and they were spreading the rumor, the lie, the fake news that our people, and it's here at the time just before Pesach, that our people were kidnapping Christian children and using their blood to make matzah. If they knew anything about the Torah, they would know that it would be absolutely impossible for us to do that because we do not eat blood. I haven't been able to find anywhere where it says that we no longer eat fat, but if it's not healthy unless it's very well cooked. But the fat certainly makes things taste better. I don't know. I wasn't able to find anything on that subject. Leviticus 4. Jerry, do you want to read any more? And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel. If anyone shall sin through error. Now, this is unintentional sin. There is no offering for intentional sin. Here is an unintentional. If any of the things which the Lord has commanded not to be done, and if any man shall do any one of them, if the anointed, here it says, HaMashiach, the anointed priest, here the Kohen, HaKohen, HaMashiach. See, the whole idea of Mashiach has been completely changed in today's world. We're waiting for one Mashiach, but throughout the Bible, we will see many Mashiachs. If the anointed Mashiach, the Kohen, shall sin, so he brings guilt on the people, then he has to make an offering for his sin, for which he sinned. He has to take a young bull without blemish to the Lord as a sin offering. This is another type of offering, Ta'at. So we have shalamim, a peace offering. We have the olah, and here we have a sin offering, Ta'at. And he shall bring the bullock, which is a young bull, to the door of the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting, before the Lord. He shall lay his hand upon the head of the bullock. You see, the Kohen is not higher than the people. He had to do exactly the same thing. He had to be an example for the rest. And he had to kill this young bull before the Lord. And again, the anointed Kohen, HaKohen HaMashiach, the anointed priest, shall take some of the blood from the bull, bring it to the tent of meeting, and the Kohen shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle it 7 times before the Lord in front of the veil of the sanctuary. And the Kohen shall put of the blood upon the horns of the altar of sweet incense before the Lord, which is in the tent of meeting. And all the remaining blood of the bullock shall he pour out at the base of the altar at the tent. He's very specific about how things are to be done. And the fat of the bull from the sin offering He shall take off from it the fat that covers the insides and the fat that's upon the insides, the 2 kidneys, the loins, the lobe of the liver. He shall take it away from the kidneys. As it is taken off from the ox of the sacrifice of peace offerings, and the Kohen shall make them smoke on the altar. But the skin, with its flesh and the head, its legs, the inwards, the dung, even the whole bullock, shall he carry outside the camp to a clean place where the ashes are poured out, and burn it on wood with fire. Where the ashes are poured out shall it be burned. Now this is for the Kohen. And here, if the whole congregation of Israel shall sin, the thing being hid from the eyes of the assembly, and do any of the things which the Lord has commanded not to be done, and are guilty, when the sin that they have sinned is known, then the assembly shall offer a young bull for a sin offering and bring it before the tent of meeting. The elders of the congregation shall lay their hands upon the head of the bull before the Lord, and the bull shall be killed. So this is also there's communal sin. It's not only individual, it's all of us together. And let me tell you, there's plenty of communal sin going on amongst our people today. We certainly need to make an offering by turning back to God. And the Kohen HaMashiach shall bring the blood of the bull to the tent of meeting. The Kohen shall dip the finger and sprinkle it 7 times. Again, we go through the same ritual over and over. And the Kohen shall make not atonement, le kaper. The Kohen shall make le kaper for the people. Their sin shall be covered. Just like Adam and Eve, their sin was covered. God covered it. Adam and Eve tried to cover it with fig leaves, but God said, no, I will show you that I am the one who will cover your sin. But they had the consequences. They were kicked out of the garden. He shall carry forth the bullock, because theirs was intentional. They knew what not to do, and they did it. So they suffered the consequences, as all humanity did after them. Now, when a ruler sins, the same thing. They have to do all the same thing. I'm not going to repeat it all because it's exactly the same words. Didn't matter whether it was the lowest, the Kohen, to the highest, the prince, to the whole community. They all had to do it. And it says, and the Kohen shall make a covering for him, and as touching his sin that he has sinned, and he shall be forgiven. This is the end of the reading. It's going to be the last.
I'll do 5 verses.
Okay, Jer.
And if anyone sin in that he heareth the voice of adjuration, he being a witness, whether he hath seen or heard known, if he do not utter it, then he shall bear its iniquity.
Okay, so what is he saying here? If you hear somebody swearing about something, if he makes a vow, and this man is a witness to the vow that he has seen, but he says nothing about it, then he shall bear his iniquity. So the person, now it's not clear, is it the person who is the witness shall bear the iniquity, or is the person who vowed bears the iniquity? What does it sound like to you, Jer?
I didn't catch this here, Peggy.
Okay.
Just
So if anyone sins because he heard the voice, adjuration means like a judgment. He heard somebody making an oath, or like he said, like how would you describe adjuration? Like he was going to vow that he was going to do it. Now he being the witness, which was anyone sins in that he hears the voice of somebody swearing, and he's a witness to it, whether he's seen it or known, but he says nothing about it, he shall bear his iniquity. He's guilty because he didn't open his mouth. Okay, continue.
Or if anyone touch any unclean thing, whether it be the carcass of an unclean beast, or the carcass of an unclean animal, or the carcass of unclean swarming things, and be guilty, it being hidden from him that he is unclean. Or if he touch the uncleanliness of man, whatsoever his uncleanness be wherewith he is unclean, and it be hid from him, and when he knoweth of it, be guilty. Or if anyone swear clearly with his lips to do evil, or to do good, whatsoever it be that a man shall utter clearly with an oath, and it be hid from him, and when he knoweth of it, be guilty in one of these things. And it shall be, when he shall be guilty in one of these things, that he shall confess that wherein he hath sinned. You're on.
And he shall bring his forfeit or his offering to the Lord for his sin, which he has sinned, a female goat from a flock, a lamb or a goat for a sin offering. And the Kohen shall make a covering for him concerning his sin. See, God takes what comes out of our mouth very seriously. As a matter of fact, one of the things that Yeshua said, doesn't matter what you put into your mouth, what matters what comes out of your mouth. And he says, if you make an oath, you need to keep it. That's when Yeshua said that whenever Yeshua spoke, all the Sermon on the Mount was always referring to the Torah. He said, let your yes be yes and your no be no. If you say you're going to do something, do it. Otherwise, do not say you're going to do it. Do not make a vow. Do not make any oaths, or because you'll be guilty if you don't keep it. In this case, if a person did that, they could bring an offering. We don't have an offering today, but what we can do is make it right. If his means suffice not, for, in other words, if he can't afford a lamb and he wants to bring his offering because he has sinned, he can bring 2 doves, 2 young pigeons to the Lord, one for a sin offering and one for a burnt offering. And he shall bring them to the Kohen, who shall offer that which is a sin offer first. And again, it goes into what everything he had to do: pinch off its neck, not divide it in 2, sprinkle the blood, and the rest would be drained. That would be a sin offering. In this case, it's ha ta'at. And he shall prepare the second for a burnt offering, according to the ordinance. And that one is and it says it will look the kaper, it will cover, the priest will cover this offering. As a cover the sin as concerned which he has sinned, and he shall be forgiven. But if it cannot afford the doves or 2 young pigeons, then he can bring an ephah of fine flour. And the same thing, the offering of the fine flour, the Kohen shall take the flour, offer it up, and he will be forgiven. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an offering of an animal or a grain or a bird. It could be a grain offering, and he will be forgiven. And if anyone commits a trespass and sins by mistake, remember, it's always by error, unintentional sin. In the holy things of the Lord, he shall bring his offering to the Lord, a ram without blemish of the flock, according to the value in silver by shekels, and after the shekel of the sanctuary for a guilt offering. And he shall make restitution for what he has done in the holy thing. And he shall add a 5th to it and give it to the Kohen. So when he knows what he has done, when even though it was through error, He has to make restitution. He has to make it right. And he's going to have to add interest to it, a fifth extra, and give it to the Kohen. Today, people sin, they steal, they don't have to give it back. They don't have to give it, pay interest on what they've taken. How many people get away with murder? They get away with theft. That's not Torah. They give it to the priest. The Kohen made atonement for him, although that was those things. I'm sorry, what I said, those were intentional. And this is unintentional sin. If anyone sins or does any of the things which the Lord has commanded not to be done. So here, mikol mitzvot, the only thing that we have at this time in our history are the 10 commandments. Moses hasn't written the Torah yet. There is no New Testament. There is no Quran. There are no other books. It was the 10 written in stone at Mount Sinai. If anyone sins and does any of the things which the Lord commanded not to be done in his 10 commandments, though even if he didn't know it, but he's guilty, he shall bear his iniquity. And he shall bring a ram without blemish out of the flock, according to the value of the ram, as a guilt offering to the Kohen, and the Kohen shall make a covering for him, and he shall be forgiven for the error which he committed, even though he did not know he was doing it. It was brought to his attention. He didn't do it on purpose. It's a guilt offering. Here it's an asham, a guilt offering. He is certainly guilty before God. So just because we don't know something doesn't mean we're not guilty. There's no excuse because we've been given the Torah. And the Lord spoke to Moses saying, if anyone sins, commits a trespass against the Lord, and deals falsely with his neighbor in a matter of a deposit, let's say, he borrowed some money or a pledge or robbery, or he oppressed his neighbor. All this has to do with the last 5 of the commandments, the last 5 commandments, because we're to deal in justice with our neighbor, or have found what was lost and dealt falsely. If we found something that was lost, but we didn't give it back, or we swore a lie, any of these things that a man does, he's sinning. Those are the last 5 commandments. Then it shall be, if he sinned and is guilty, he shall restore what he took, what he stole, and the thing that he got by oppression. If he oppressed a person and he beat him up and he stole, or the deposit which was deposited with him. Let's say somebody left something with him for him to take care of, and he didn't take care of it, or he lost, he found something. See, all these things now are how to apply the 10 commandments. The entire rest of the Torah will be how to apply the commandments to our lives. Anything about which he has sworn falsely. Let's say he told a lie about somebody. He ruined their reputation. He shall restore it in full. Sometimes we can't do that. He shall add the 5th part. Like, let's say he goes to court and he swears falsely about someone who ends up being put to death. How could that ever be restored? But in this cases, these are things which could be restored because he had to add interest to what he had to pay back. It's not enough to say, I'm sorry. We have to make restitution. Upon him to whom it concerns, shall he give it. He had to give back to the person that he stole from in the days of his being guilty. He shall bring his offering to the Lord, a ram without blemish of the flock, according to your valuation, for a guilt offering to the Kohen. The Kohen shall make atonement for him before the Lord, and he shall be forgiven concerning whatsoever he does, so that makes him guilty. And that is the end of this part. So do you see how what we're reading here has application for our lives? how those 10 are the plumb line, are the constitution for Israel. And those 10 had to be observed. And when we broke them, the only way that unknowingly, the only way was to bring an offering to God. We could not bring an offering if we did something intentionally. We would be held accountable and responsible for in most of the intentional sins were judged according to the scriptures we'll see later on. They would be put to death. But here they could be forgiven. Today, if I say something, let's say I say something, Jerry, to Miriam behind your back of something you did, and I ruin your reputation. That's the 9th, I'm breaking the 9th commandment. I'm gossiping and I'm ruining your reputation. I have to make restitution. I have to go to you and to Miriam, apologize, and make it right somehow. Sometimes we cannot restore a reputation. We have to be really careful the words that come out of our mouths. So that's what these offerings were about. Some say that the book of Leviticus is very boring, but believe it or not, in Hasidism, in the Orthodox Judaism, when children are learning Hebrew, they start with the book of Leviticus, the Vayikra. They had to learn this first, and they're given candies made of honey, or they dip. Brian, you need to keep that off. Thank you. They'll dip when they say something right. The rabbi will dip honey and put it on his tongue to show this child how sweet the Torah is, not only to God, but to our ears.
What's her name breaks the 9th and 10th commandments in this house?
Well, you have to help her understand without yelling and without getting upset, by living them yourself. Okay, I hear a lot of noise in your background, Brian. I'm going to mute you, okay? So, Jerry, any comments about this beautiful portion?
Well, there's a lot of heavy stuff here with sin, intentional and unintentional. And did I tell you? Well, no, I don't think I'll say it on here. It's not serious, but yeah. So I'm not sure. I think some unintentional sin is just as or not as serious as intentional sin.
Exactly. When you do something intentionally, it's called, that's why people say, like the 8th commandment, you shall not kill. It's actually, the word is more, the idea is not to kill, because God built an army. We would have to go and kill our enemies. We would have to kill an animal for food. So it's not, the idea is not kill. You shall not do premeditated murder. There's a difference between an accidental killing, when somebody, let's say you had an axe and the end of the axe flew off by accident and killed your neighbor, the person who was working with you. That's unintentional sin. And we know that God had us build what's called cities of refuge, because let's say the family was so upset at this guy because he didn't take care of his axe. He didn't make sure that it was on firmly enough, and he killed somebody in their family. They would want to go after the person who did that. So the person who killed this other one accidentally could flee to the city of refuge where he would be protected. So there's a very different, but if he murdered his neighbor intentionally, and there were witnesses, and people went to the judges and showed them that he did it on purpose, they would he would be put to death. There is no forgiveness for intentional sin. They had to pay the consequences. I believe in the death penalty. The only problem with that in our in the day and age that we're living in is that we cannot trust. We have a legal system that works more on precedents than by each case. And very often people will get off if they have a lot of money. We don't have a legal system where you have unbiased judges. People could be paid to lie. So because it says in the presence of 2 or 3 witnesses, must be present. 2 or 3 witnesses must be present before anyone can be condemned to death. But you have to make sure that these witnesses were honest and had a fear of God. Unfortunately, we live in a society where there's very little fear of God right now, which is why there's so much garbage going on in the world. Anything else come to your mind?
Well, there's many things, but we're never going to finish them all, you know.
It's okay. Bring up something so that those listening, because the idea is for us to learn how to apply these to our lives. It's not about just learning them.
Well, I think you're placing your hand on an animal and they kill the animal while you're doing that. I think it should have quite an effect on the person, you know.
It does. I remember when my rabbi went with some of the other men. We had a family. Actually, this family still lives up in Lashut, and they raised. They had a couple of lambs that they raised specifically to be offered for Pesach. And my rabbi went up with some of the men. I didn't go, and he said this was the first time that he'd witnessed that. And he put his hand on the head of the lamb as it was being killed. And he said that some of the blood, it was slaughtered according to the kashrut, the way of kashrut. The lamb said nothing. It was a very quick cut. The lamb didn't feel it, but it was bleeding out. And he said, as the lamb was bleeding, some of the blood fell onto his hand, and the lamb licked it from his hand. He said he was so shaken by this that it was I think that was the last time they did it, because it was so difficult a thing to do. You know, you'll see in many societies, like with the North American Indians, the natives, when they would kill an animal, they would place the hand on its head and give it thanks for giving its life so that they could live. And that was the idea. Remember, we were dealing with natives, people who had killed to be able to live. We are not to kill out of vengeance or revenge or hatred or anger. The time that we kill, when we were to kill an animal, is only for food. And we thank God and we thank the animal for giving its life for us. That's the idea of the shalamim. The lamb that was killed at Pesach, which is going to happen in 2 weeks, was a shalamim. It was a thanksgiving offering. We were giving God thanks for bringing us out of Egypt. We were placing our hand on that little lamb, but the blood was placed on the doorpost, and the firstborn inside was going to be saved from the angel of death. It was a thanksgiving. It had nothing to do with a sin offering. As a matter of fact, the people inside the house never asked for forgiveness for sin. They were told to be obedient. The ones that were sheltered and saved from the angel of death were those who were obedient to God. They put the blood on the doorpost. As a matter of fact, even if they were Egyptian and they believed what God had said, and they put the blood on the doorpost, their firstborn were saved. It had nothing to do with race, color, creed, it had to do with obedience to the Creator. Heavy duty. You see, people make rules and regulations, a theology that are based on later writings, and they're not looking at what the Torah is saying. Anyway, if there's nothing else that you have to add to this, Jerry,
Oh,
we
not,
can-
not, yeah.
we'll say good night, and I look forward to this Shabbat and listening to our rabbi's message. And next week we'll be doing. Oh, I didn't prepare again. This is Vayikra, and next week we're going to be doing. Let's see. Hold on a second. Are we the last? I think we're the last Shabbat in. Yes, we're the last Shabbat in March. We are the first of Nisan tonight. Next week will be Tzav, which means command. And then the following Wednesday, we won't have the, next Wednesday. Wait a minute. Yeah, next Wednesday we're meeting. That's the 29th. But the following, we will not be meeting because we'll be having our Seders in our homes. So for this evening, I say good night. It's been a pleasure to present this to you again. I'm loving the Torah more and more and more, going on my 34th year of studying the Torah as a layperson, as a student of my rabbi, and somebody who loves God and his Torah. So I wish everybody good night, and we'll see you again, God willing, next week.